Chapter 13. Governor Johnson assures President Johnson that there will be no violence in Mississippi. J.E. Cheney, A. Goodman, and M.H. Schwerner, 3 civil rights workers, were found murdered. Quitman County, Mississippi. June 8, 1966. I never feel a part of the march or any activity unless I have more of a contributing role to play, other than just as a participant. When Stony Cook gave me an assignment that I knew that I could do well, I was relieved. Yes, there's something that you can do, starting right away, he said. Take this shorthand pad and pencil and contact Charlie Horowitz. Tell him that you're going to help with the press releases and report back to staff so that we'll know what's going on. You can help us write the press releases on the march. Will you do that for us? Find Big Leon. He's going to be driving the station wagon and taking Bob Green out to the march when they leave. You can go out with them. When I met Charlie Horowitz, he was busy getting a group to go out to Quitman County to register voters. The atmosphere was tense, and smiles were not to be seen. Not even on the pretty face of the girl that Leroy called Sweetness. She merely nodded her recognition at me and scowled back at Horowitz, who apparently was telling her that it was too dangerous for her to go with the group out to Quitman County. Get it in your head, I heard him say. This is not Selma. I remember wondering, how could it be much worse? And how could that courageous young woman be in more danger than she had already faced? When he finally looked up at me, standing there with my pencil and pad, I could tell that he thought that I was a reporter. I can't talk to you right now, he said. I'm sending this group out. After explaining who I was and what I had been assigned to do, I asked him if I could go out to Quitman County. No. They're going into Marks to stay at the MFDP headquarters there for a few days. You better stay here with the march. Explain who you are again? Are you a reporter, or are you with us? That's what I've been trying to tell you. Carl wants me to get information that will be good for news releases and report back to staff in Memphis. Hell with that. They got enough people doing that. Listen, there are 2 things that you can do to help me. One is to register voters. Have you ever done that? Yes, in Alabama. Good. The other thing is, take this phone number down. It's the number of a Chicago radio station. If you can call them about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they'll set you up on a tape. You can give them the report from the march that I promised them. I don't think I can do that. That's right up my alley. I'm a broadcaster. Great. Remember to begin each one with, this is Delta Radio in Mississippi reporting. That's a load off of my mind, thanks. Listen, the march is going to start soon, and I got to get these guys moving. Meet me at lunchtime. Owen Brooks and I are going out to a meeting in Marks. You can go out with us. I left Charlie with his group, and I went to join the march for the first leg of 15 miles. Stony Cook waved to me from his place in the first group. Hey, man, you want to get in here? No, I'm going to walk up and down the line to interview people. I walked slowly, allowing the singing marchers to pass by me. The creeping green lagoon called Kutzo gave an eerie background to the dramatic scene about to unfold. Its leaves reflected the early morning heat. I tied the sleeves of my jacket around my waist and was about to speak to my first marcher when I found myself being interviewed. The smiling, clean-shaven young man that walked up alongside of me and touched my elbow still smelled from aftershave. It was obvious that he hadn't spent the night in the tent. It was also obvious that he wasn't with the march. Who are you with? He asked. Then he reacted to my baffled expression by glancing down at the pad that I had stuffed under my belt. Oh, I'm just taking notes. I came here to march and to learn. Well, he said, putting his golf hat back and adjusting his sunglasses before pulling the cap back down, I'm with the TV crew out of Chicago. I came here to learn also. You taught me something already. The other night when you were discussing violence and nonviolence with that kid from Chicago, it really caught my interest. I hope that you don't intend to keep doing that. I'm afraid that you might get yourself killed. It wouldn't surprise me if that kid was carrying a weapon. I feel that I must. I hate what I've been hearing over here since I first arrived. I don't know if I can call myself a pacifist. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure there really is such a person alive today. The trouble with most of those who labeled themselves pacifist is that they've never defined violence. How can you say that? Dr. King is a pacifist, isn't he? Perhaps that is something that this march is going to determine. He is going to spend a lot of time trying to convince some of the young gang leaders that you saw me talking to earlier that nonviolence takes more courage and is more manly than violence. Young people today, especially black people, are really hung up on that image of man. So King is going to have to separate the tactic of nonviolence from that awful word, pacifism. I'm not so sure that we can do it here in Mississippi. I don't think that SNCC is going to allow him to. We have two different philosophies about how to achieve the same goals. They're coming to a head in Mississippi. I fully understand both, but I must support King. His way is the only way at this time. I turned to the reporter and saw the concern in his eyes. You said that I taught you something. What was that? I asked. Well, I've been covering these things for a while, and I might add that if I wasn't working, I would be marching right alongside of you. That's one of the reasons that I'm here. There are a lot of crackers in that damn press truck. Anyway, I've never seen such hatred in the eyes of so-called civil rights workers. When you said that provocateurs that start violence here are worse than any Tom, white or black, because they are doing what the man wants them to do, and that kid started for you, I knew that in an instant, that the we shall overcome days are gone. I don't think they're ever coming back, and I'm quite concerned about an open battle developing within the ranks on this march. I don't think so. There may be a battle, but I doubt that it will be that open. I think that there may be a lot of arguments about tactics, but a crisis will come, and that will bring us all together under Dr. King. That may be, but you see the deacons here with their guns? And I'm sure that they know a lot of other people here that have guns. Do you think they're going to use them? Yes, I'm afraid so, if the situation presents itself. That's why I feel that I must give King as much vocal support as I can. Well, he said, I hope that you stay out of the line of fire. Listen, I have to go now. I have an interview with King coming up. See you later. There is one thing that you ought to learn, though. That is to wear a hat, or this Mississippi sun will flatten you. Tape 4, Part 1. NAACP withdraws support for CLFO. Says students that have come to Mississippi to register voters are being absorbed into the radical SNCC organization. June 9th, 1966. Confusion, fear, and dissension. Tape 4, Part 1. Resting on Route 51, just outside of Batesville, Mississippi. Leroy, I said, when I first joined the march, I thought that things were disorganized. Now they seem to be getting worse with each day. Yes, to tell the truth, we're very disorganized. None of us really have any special assignments. We were just told to help the marchers in any way that we can, and to try and show the local peoples not to be afraid. The trouble is that the people here seem to be so afraid that I worry we're not going to be able to do that. They really have a lot to be afraid of. When some of them SNCC workers come around and tell them that they got to get guns, it make them even more afraid. But when they see Dr. King come, they at least get the confidence to come out and watch. Sometimes Hosea say, if you with us, wave your hand, and peoples would wave their hand in front of them, close to their chest so the white folk couldn't see. I know that COFO and SNCC and all them kids that work in Mississippi before we get here deserve a lot of credit. They've been beaten and jailed and even murdered. I don't want to take anything away from them, the great things that they have done, but you can see how people's come out and just try and touch Dr. King. When he asks them, you going to come out and register to vote? They always say, sure enough. And the next day, I see them at the courthouse. The very first day, we register about 50 people. We got the television with us now, and that make it easier. Them kids from COFO and SNCC, they have to work alone. They're the real heroes. Charles Evers didn't want to join the march. It seemed like he real mad because King come to this state and he take over. He said that we better quit our marching and start registering voters. But we say we doing that already. I've been driving back and forth between the march and Memphis all this time, carrying people to the motel and the staff office and the airport. At the march, I sometimes have to drive people to the courthouse to register because they're afraid to go alone. I hear staff people complaining all the time about the lack of organization. They say we short on food, we short on money, medical supplies. And the further we get from Memphis, the worse things going to get. When we talk about transportation and logistics and how we're going to get the supplies to the march, the SNCC kids all laugh at us. They say the revolutionaries have got to learn to live off the land and have the participation and cooperation of the local people. They say we can't make it through Mississippi unless we have the people's help. We can't just say the king is here and everything gonna be all right. They say that we got to show the local people that they got to be the leaders now, or when King go back, they're gonna catch hell here. I wonder how you're gonna develop leaders when all the time they're talking about guns. Negro people in Mississippi know all about guns. They know that the man got plenty of them. We got to show them that Americans, black and white, gonna stand with them like we did in Selma. Then they're gonna come out, and then they're gonna register. I tell you, Mr. Truskoff. Oh, I know. I'm supposed to call you Dave. Well, Dave, I'm beginning to get mad. Seems like every place we go, there's Willie Ricks or somebody from SNCC yelling Black Power and telling them poor people that come out of the fields and that they know where they can get guns to fight for freedom. I was beginning to believe what one newspaper man already wrote, and that this march is going to fall apart. What worried me is how many people's going to get killed first. What surprised me is that not only white people dropping out, but so is some black people. They say they can't support it because of the things that Willie Ricks is saying. You remember that we camped that first night at Eden Dam, and everybody's so depressed? I will admit, Leroy, I said, that I was on the verge of going home, although I hated to admit it. That don't surprise me. I thought that maybe it would be the last night of the march anyway, and that King gonna call it all off. But then I say, no, we can't do that. It would destroy the whole movement. Remember that the camp was at the foot of the dam, and the state troopers was all the way up on top of us with their rifles? I say the same thing that the Hoseas say. I don't think that I want to stay in that tent tonight. But then something happened that made everybody feel better. Dr. King, he called everybody into the tent, and he make a speech. He say, I didn't come to Mississippi to argue about who's going to be a leader. We all leaders for freedom. And we're going to stomp the fear into the ground of Mississippi. He say, whoever told you that freedom is something that is going to be handed to you on a silver platter? We all here, and we all going to stay here. We are going to march through the state of Mississippi, and we're going to register voters of this poor state along the way. Everybody cheer, but only a few holler back, Black Power. Dr. King say, we got to show the people of this state and the people of the world that we have moral power. Everybody cheer louder. Then Fannie Lou Hamer starts singing, and you know how we all love that woman. She been beaten real bad, and she been jailed, and even though she limping, she's still marching and singing. Everybody know how it hurt her just to walk, but she here. She says she's gonna walk us all in Jackson. When we get there, she's gonna walk across Senator Eastman's plantation. When Fannie Lou Hamer sing, everybody sing. She say they tell black men to go and fight for free elections in Vietnam, but the black people can't vote here. We gotta change that. Big Leon was standing next to me. He was smiling and he say, now, Leroy, we going all the way. Chapter 14. Grenada, Mississippi, June 9th, 1966. The 21 men charged with the murder of the 3 civil rights workers near Philadelphia, Mississippi, are cleared, including Sheriff Rainey and his deputy Price. This in spite of the confession by one of the men. This is Delta Radio reporting from Grenada, Mississippi. A hot, weary, but determined group of marchers with newfound spirit is pushing on to Holcomb, Mississippi, this afternoon. Dr. Martin Luther King is setting a steady pace at the head of the line. Dr. King answered many reporters' questions at noon today regarding the tone of the march. Those that cannot say that they are nonviolent will be asked to leave, he said. He also responded to questions from reporters regarding the local appointed deputies taking the names of residents who had joined the march. They fear that they might lose their jobs when the marchers leave. Freedom is not some lavish dish set out on a silver plate, King said. Most have had to suffer to bring us this far, and many more will have to suffer. But I can tell you this, Mississippi will never be the same. Spirits are up now because word keeps coming in about how many new people are being registered to vote. 400 by noon today in Grenada alone. George Ramon, who stayed behind with a task force to continue the registration drive here, told me just moments ago that, of course, registering voters is the most important thing. However, he did try to get served in a restaurant this morning, but was told that the counter was closed. This white reporter was served at the same counter just moments before. The white community here is learning that this is not just a march for the cameras, but a real working party passing through their town to register voters and wrench some power from the whites. That fact contributes to the tension that mounts by the hour. Arguments among the marchers over tactics and nonviolence have diminished, and healthy dialogue among the various groups has added to the new high spirit, although one can still hear the cry for Black Power as the march continues. This has been a report from Delta Radio in Grenada, Mississippi. Tape 4, Part 2. The Mississippi sun get warmer, the highway longer, tempers shorter. The popular songs sung by the marchers often ask the question, which side are you on, man? Which side are you on? Before the Mississippi March, the answer was easy. Leroy, we have had almost a week now to analyze our situation here in Mississippi. The songs are the same. We have a lot of the same people that we had in Selma. But I guess that is where the similarity ends. To tell you the truth, Leroy, a lot of white people are leaving the march, and I'm not so sure that I blame them. I know. There were places in Alabama where I could feel safe. Not many, I said, seeing his depressed mood. For the first time since we crossed the border into Mississippi, I heard Leroy laugh out loud. That's true, but there were some. Now here, I never feel safe. Yesterday, I could hear these two local white girls saying real loud so everybody could hear, "That's him. There he is. That's the Leroy Moton that was with that white woman." You know, sometimes I'm happy when people recognize me, but not here in Mississippi. Everything seems to be getting worse by the day. I see you walking up and down the line, and I say, that white man better be more careful. Dr. Green stopped the march yesterday to tell the troopers that we ain't going to continue until they stop these cars from riding by so close and harassing us. I seen one of them cars just miss you. You know what they said when they went by, Leroy? They said, "Jew reporter, go home." Leroy shook his head and smiled. Maybe if they knew you wasn't a reporter, they might have hit you. I hear Dr. Green tell the troopers that somebody going to get hurt, and the troopers is responsible. Then those white men on the side of the road hold that gun on some of our staff peoples. I don't think that trooper wanted to take the gun away from that man, but he had to. Some of our people say the man in charge of that group of whites with the guns is led by the man who shot Medgar Evers. Of course, his trial ended like Liuzzo's trial, a hung jury. To tell you the truth, Mr. Truskoff, I don't know which worry me more, them whites with the guns or some of the kids from the north that's marching with us. Sometimes I say that I'm glad they're with us, but sometimes they steal things, and all the local girls is afraid of them. I heard this one white nurse that's with us tell you that one of them harassing her real bad, and she afraid. That get me so mad. Here's this girl risking her life marching with us, and she got to be afraid of one of the marchers. I heard her tell you when she say that that man's still after her. You said that it would be real bad if the Southern reporters hear that a white man have to tell a Negro to leave a white girl alone. So you tell her to go tell Mr. Thomas of the Deacons what's happening. He'll take care of it. At first I worry about the Deacons being here with their guns. Now I'm glad they are. We need our own police. Those gang leaders from the north are scaring the girls, using dope and all that. We got enough to worry about. We don't need that. They make it so much noise in the tents at night that it seemed like even the leaders are afraid of them. One night Stokely come into the den and he asked them all to be quiet because the marchers needed their rest. And they tell him to go to hell. And he leave. Worst thing about them is that they don't know much. They don't know what's going on. They just talk and hate. They saying things like, we don't need any white peoples on the march and all that. Nonsense. Everybody afraid of them because they say they're carrying guns and knives and they may be flying on dope, so nobody want to take a chance to have a bad incident. We try and make believe they ain't even with the march, but some of the newspaper guys is already linking them with Stokely and saying that they part of this army, and they're going to take over the march. I know that ain't the truth, because I know that Stokely have no control over them either. Every night we would start singing to keep the arguments about violence and nonviolence from spreading. I'm sure that you noticed that the white peoples who are here to join a nonviolent march are getting very quiet. They're afraid to say anything, and like you said, many are leaving. Every time that something would happen, like when one of them crazy Klanmen that shoot that poor 65-year-old black man at Natchez, some of them gang leaders would start shouting, "Let's go to Natchez." The Deacons have two-way radios in their cars, and they would listen to the police and the Klan's radio. When they hear that the Klansmen run down a little Negro girl, they take off in their cars, and I say to myself, oh, here's where the shooting war begins. That same night, them kids from Chicago run through the tents hollering, here come the Klan, they're going to get us, they're going to gas us. For a minute, I thought that it might be true, because just a few hours earlier, I'd seen the troopers all standing on the corner, and we on the other. Across the street, there was a gas station that was full of white men, all carrying clubs and all. I thought that it was them, and that they was coming, and I figured that the deacon's going to get some of them. But it all turned out to be a hoax. That's the way some of them kids from Chicago were. It was only the ones from the gangs like that. Grenada was the one town in Mississippi that I will never forget. So many people come out to greet the march. They didn't seem to be so afraid. Even though them deputies was taking their names and their pictures. Dr. Green was beautiful. He led the march right into that little park in the center of town, and that makes all the local whites real mad. They had decided to just try and ignore the march, and it was just going to pass through and go away. They was disappointed. When they heard how many people got registered to vote, they started getting even more mad. All the stores had their lights out, and they make believe that they're closed. Dr. Green, he'd climb up on the monument for Jefferson Davis, and he'd pick up a little Negro kid, and he'd say, here, you put this American flag up there. We got to tell these peoples that this is America, not the Confederacy. Everybody cheer. Then I almost cry, because Hosea tell everybody that this is where the slaves used to be bought and sold, and that the freedom train smuggled lots of Negroes out of here. He asked everybody to join them in singing the Freedom Trail song, Steal Away. I see people get past the first part of the song, and then they all start to cry. Somebody mentioned that they still got bathrooms marked number 1 and number 2 in the town hall. So Dr. Green say that while we're here, we might as well go over there and see if what the white man hiding in that bathroom marked number 1 for whites. But the best thing I'm going to remember about Grenada happened that first night when we was there. There was that Klansman riding around in that car with the white sheet and the swastika on it. Somebody yelled, hey, that sheet belong on your head. And the driver, looking at that person stepping out in the road, almost drove the car into a tree. We all laughed. We was having a meeting that night, and everybody was expecting trouble, so some of us was told to stay outside and watch. Now I know you remember this, and I'm sorry that nobody take pictures. I am 6 foot 6 inches tall, and here come a beautiful girl almost as tall as I am. I say to myself, Leroy, this just can't be. I went over to talk to her, and while we talking some junk, here come another beautiful girl, just as tall as the other one. I feel I must be dreaming. She turned out to be the first girl's twin sister. I put one on each arm, and I start walking up and down in front of the church where the meeting at. Leon and Stoney and some of them all stop and stare. Then they laugh. Them girls was having a great time. I give them some of the pins that I was wearing, and they put them on. I laugh so hard when you come along. You look, and then you look away, and then you look again. I seen Dr. Green coming, and I say to him, hey, Dr. Green, look here. I'm getting them to join the march, else I'm staying here. Even he laughed when he see me with them 2 tall girls. They was so sweet. They stay with the march for a little while the next day, but then they get a ride back home. They say they have to go back to work. Chapter 15, Sunflower County, June 1966. Violence begets violence. When we march into Philadelphia, Mississippi for memorial service for Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, the nonviolent movement is tested. I think it was the young man that we used to call Little Leon, Leon Hall, who met at the corner in front of the little courthouse in Greenwood, Mississippi, and asked me for change for the ever-present outdoor cook machines that you saw everywhere in the South. I gave him some change, but I never looked at him. My eyes were fixed on a slouching middle-aged man standing across the street. I told Leon to tell someone, preferably the deacons, that the man had been following me since we first marched into Grenada. Who is that? Leon asked. I wish I knew. Maybe he's from the Justice Department. The police seem to know him. No, he's too shabby looking. He does seem to be trying too hard to look like he is an official of some kind. I saw him taking names when we went into Grenada, and I tried to talk to him and ask him what he was doing, but he just walked away. He's been following me ever since. I see him almost everywhere that I go. He was wearing some kind of a badge when I made a phone call in Grenada. He was standing right outside the booth when I came out. I think he's a nut. You better tell Andy or one of the Justice Department guys. Maybe they know him. Listen, Leon, while the whole march is here, in front of the courthouse, I'm going over and I'm going to try and talk to him again. Stay here and keep an eye on us. I'll be right back. I walked across the street towards the LaFleur County Courthouse. Realizing that I was coming towards him, the man started to leave, but the only way out was towards me. The troopers were standing behind him to keep the marchers off the grass, and the march was surging towards the courthouse steps to his left. He stopped and put one hand in his pocket in sort of a threatening gesture as I approached. I took out my pad and pencil, pretending to be a newsman. "Hi," I said, holding a smile as best I could. "I thought that I saw you back in Grenada. Aren't you a deputy or something in that county?" "I'm a deputy in every county." "Is that right? I didn't realize that you were a deputy in LaFleur also. Do you have lots of different badges? Or just one?" He looked away and pretended to be interested in something else. "I wonder, sir, if you'd give me your name and tell me your impression of what's going on here," I asked, not expecting to get an answer. He said nothing more, but continued to watch the marchers approach the steps. I walked back over to Leon. "What did he say?" Leon asked, conveying his nervousness to me. "He said that he's a deputy in every county. That's all that he said. I'm sure the guy is some kind of crazy. I'll report him as soon as I get the chance. Thanks for staying." "Dave, I'm driving back to Memphis tonight. Do you want to go? You can get some real rest in a motel." "Leon, that sounds like one hell of an idea. I'll meet you later." It was too late for me to get back across the street to join the marchers, so I watched the pushing and shoving from the corner and waited for the speech-making to end. The march was reforming and headed towards the camp area. I started to look for an outdoor phone. I had been taking notes for my daily broadcasts. By the time that I had found a phone that was not being used by a newsman, the march was already headed out of town. It wasn't until I heard the signal from the radio station engineers that the tape was rolling that I noticed the man from Grenada standing outside of the phone booth. He sneered at me, and his lower lip dropped. "Jew, commie, nigger-loving bastard," he growled, his face twisted in hate. The phone booth door was bent, and I couldn't close it all the way. It was the old-fashioned kind that you don't see anymore in the city. Instinctively, I tried to pull it closed and kept one hand on the handle. I held my notes with the other, and I tried to read, hoping that when I looked up, he would be gone and following the marchers. When I got the signal from the engineer at the Chicago radio station, I began to read, "This is Delta Radio in Greenwood, Mississippi." The same freedom fever that hit Bates, Charleston, and Grenada hit Greenwood this afternoon, singing, clapping, cheering marchers, calling out to others along the way to come and join the March for Freedom. Dr. King, Stokely Carmichael, and Hosea Williams led the procession into town. Greenwood, known for years in the civil rights movement as a very tough town, has given the marchers more cooperation than was expected, although everyone knows that the word has come down from the Mississippi Governor Johnson's office to just let, and I quote, "these agitators pass through the state as quickly as possible with no incidents," end quote. That is why the marchers are in no real hurry to reach Jackson. The march made its way up Cotton Street and through the white community to the courthouse. There, they were met by the sheriff and his deputies, who pushed Dr. King, Hosea Williams and Stokely Carmichael off the grass. There were a few tense moments. But the crowd surged in behind King, and the marchers made their way up the steps to hear the speakers. The bishop of the AME Zion Church drew loud cheers when he said that fear is a thing of the past for Negro people in Mississippi. Kim Hope, a local civil rights leader, reminded the large crowd that Greenwood is a symbol to the movement. Civil rights workers were shot here, and this is the home of the accused murderer of Medgar Evers. I could divert my eyes no longer. I stopped reading for a second and glanced at the man outside the booth. He had taken his hand out of his pocket and drew a pistol out. "Jew, commie, son of a bitch," he said, out of the side of his mouth, rubbing the pistol against the side of his leg. "Listen," I shouted into the phone. "There's a man outside of this phone booth with a gun. He claims that he's a deputy from Grenada, but I think he's some kind of a loony." There was a pause that seemed like an hour. I could hear my own heavy breathing into the phone. A deep voice on the other end finally said, "Do you want to continue? Do you want to give me a description of this man?" I softly spoke, trying to sound calm. I didn't know if the tape was still running. "He is white, about 40, not tall, with a gray felt hat and a brown shabby jacket, I said, "I better get out of here. If I run, I can still catch up to the marchers. There are still people around. I'll catch you later." Without pausing to look at the man, I raced out of the booth and ran as fast as I could to catch up to the march. I ran alongside of an open convertible that Andy Young was riding in. I called up to him and told him what had happened. He asked me to point the man out. I never got the chance. The next time that I saw him was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and there was no time to point anybody out on that occasion. Andy's car pulled ahead, and I was once again surrounded by singing marchers. It was a warm blanket on a stormy night, but my mind remained focused on that ugly face outside the phone booth. I was beginning to feel a bit panicky, not from fear. That's always there, and you learn how to handle it. But because I felt my newly adopted philosophy beginning to slip from my grasp. It had been a long time since anyone called me a Jew with that kind of venom. My mother was a Jew, and in that sense, I found the word Jew beautiful. But when it was growled through the teeth of a sick animal, it awakened all the memories of abuse that I had suffered as a child by the immigrant children in New Jersey, whose parents brought their old country prejudice with them in the decades of the 20s and the 30s. I felt my skin get cold against my perspiration-soaked shirt, and the familiar anger boiled up inside of me. I wanted to punch his ugly face. I immediately felt guilty, and I tried to conjure up visions of the Quakers, who called themselves pacifists, and all the nonviolent people that I had surrounded myself with over the past years. I had hoped that I would be fully converted by now. But I realized that if I were indeed to be converted, I would have to convert myself. I never really accepted pacifism. I knew that I never would, not unless it was clearly defined. Turn the other cheek was just too simple. Violence takes too many forms. Those that may not strike back physically may destroy another by different means. I found that some of those calling themselves peaceful people in the anti-war movement were not always peaceful. Verbally, they could destroy you and pick your bones like a bunch of crows with roadkill. Not counting the stupid Navy brawls that were mostly to alleviate the excruciating boredom of military life or the silly bubbling over of enthusiasm on the football field, almost every fistfight that I ever had as a young man was because of some racist or anti-Semitic remark. I knew what was right, and I tried. I read books by philosophers who, for the most part, hid from the world and told everyone else how to love each other. When I read that Gandhi had brutalized his wife, I decided that I had to define my own form of pacifism. The only one that made sense to me and called himself nonviolent was Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a preacher, but he didn't stay in the pulpit and preach. He was an American leader. He was nonviolent, but first he was a tactician. He was a Christian, but first he was a man. And I'll confess that when we all started for the first trip into Philadelphia, Mississippi, I was leaning heavily on his wisdom to keep me from being influenced by the gun-carrying provocateurs that were among us. The incident by the Philistine deputy at the phone booth in Greenwood put more than just a little dent in my nonviolent armor. I was getting more sensitive to being called nonviolent. How can one respond rationally to such irrational people? As I began to sense everyone else becoming much more tense. It wasn't just fear, although fear does at times blot out all rationale. I was always in awe of the tremendous courage displayed by the unarmed civil rights workers in Mississippi. I knew that their fear was the same as my fear when we traveled along a dirt road with a pickup truck following us full of rednecks. It seemed then that every pickup in the state had hunting rifles prominently displayed across a rifle rack in the back window. When we headed for the town in Drew in Sunflower County, a pickup followed us much of the way, and we could only see the rifles. But we could also see the rednecks inside the truck waving their middle fingers at us. It was the region where the women that I love to call the mother of all civil rights workers in Mississippi, Fannie Lou Hamer, lived and worked. It was also the home of United States Senator Eastland. This time, more than one pickup truck dodged us as we headed for the senator's plantation to try and register voters. Armed guards told us that it was private property, and even the workers who lived there could have guests only if they were permitted on the property by the owner. This time we had guns in front of us and guns behind us. Not only were the ever-present pickups there, but also what appeared to be a sheriff's posse of armed men standing by. I could see the pitiful expression on some of the slaves that worked there. I tried what I had Seeing Hosea Williams doing along the march, I called out to a small group, "If you're with us, wave." Not one moved, but an older man who stood bent over with both hands on his knees wiggled his fingers. We knew that we were beaten that day, and we were an angry, tired, depressed group as we got into the cars and headed back to camp. I get teary-eyed when I look at this portion of my faded notebook. I remember hugging Fannie Lou Hammer and saying, "Keep on, we're winning." "Oh," she said, giving my arm a squeeze, "as far as I'm concerned, we already won. From now on, it's just a matter of getting them to understand that." The same pickup stayed with us all the way out and all the way back. At one time, it drew up so close that we cringed against the back of the seats in our cars. But then it slowed and fell back. It finally stopped as we got closer to town. "Stennis and Eastland gonna free them Vietnamese," our driver said through clenched teeth. "Yeah," echoed a passenger next to me. "Maybe we ought to bring some white Marines into Drew and Sunflower County so they can have free elections. I think peoples like Harry Bowie and Fannie Lou ought to get the Congressional Medal of Honor for fighting for free elections for the peoples of Drew, Mississippi." The remarks were bitter and cold as ice that shattered in the vehicle. When a member of the Brooklyn, New York chapter of CORE said, "No Vietnamese ever called me a nigger," there was a nodding of heads. It was like riding back on the team bus after losing the championship game. Defeat mixes with anger and frustration, and you seek something to hit. I couldn't help but remember the night that we were held in the Selma Recreation Hall, the laughter, the tears, the festive atmosphere, the rabbis, ministers, and students. Where were they? Surely the people of Mississippi needed them just as much as they were needed in Alabama. Surely Dr. King was just as right now as he was then. Surely the liberals must realize that it was even more important for them to be here, if for no other reason than to try and save the nonviolent movement. I listened to the hatred and the bitterness in that automobile. I had no idea what would have happened if the men in that pickup truck had stopped us or fired at us. I let my eyes wander over to my jacket that was being used to cover a towel wrapped around an ugly old Army Colt 45. I suddenly felt the tears rushing into my eyes. Where the hell is everybody? Where's all that money that I used to find so easy to raise? I was afraid that these kids might be led to slaughter should one incident spark the violence. I could not believe that the integrationalists, the liberalists, the union leaders, who were so helpful in achieving the victory in Alabama, were going to let the movement crash and burn in Mississippi just because some of the marchers are calling for black power. During my last interview with Dr. King, I mentioned the Vietnamese Buddhist monk that I had the pleasure of hosting during his tour in the United States. Thich Nhat Hanh was marked for death in his own country for preaching nonviolence. I have never felt such a feeling of oneness with anyone more than I did with him, said King. I am sick of Vietnam, and I'm sick of violence, he said. Hey, look, I suddenly blurted out in the car. Get that goddamn gun out from under my jacket. I don't want to think that I'm associated with that in any way. Chapter 16, Tape 4, Part 3. The U.S. Justice Department admits that the FBI has a second confession in the case of the 3 civil rights workers murdered in Mississippi. A time for reflection and rest in the back of a station wagon, but the storm clouds were forming. I don't know about you, Leroy, but as we approached Greenwood, the whole atmosphere of the march seemed to change. Yeah, it did seem like it. The closer we got to town, the more I wanted to go home. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't like what was happening to the movement. Greenwood is where the National Office of SNCC is located, and they've been here a long time. People here like them, and Stokely have lots of friends here. The whites, they know this, and they think that they're expecting something to happen. Have you noticed that there are more whites along the way watching the march? Yes, I have. I thought that was because we were approaching larger towns. No, sir. Some of them whites following us a long way. I seen them hollering things and pointing their fingers at me. The newsmen, they all expecting SNCC to take over this march in Greenwood. Then what's going to happen? Stokely is an intelligent person, I said. He isn't going to let us all get divided here. He knows that would mean disaster. I hope you're right. I feel so sorry for these peoples. Were you there when they were supposed to stop and rest at the Baptist church? The women had all that food and coffee, and cold drinks and everything all ready. And here come the preacher riding in the sheriff's car. And he say, nope, I didn't give nobody permission to camp here. You peoples have to move on. The poor man, he was shaking all over. I know that Stokely understand this. These peoples, they so scared. And they got a right to be scared. Anyhow, Dr. King just say, let's move on. I know he don't want to push the man. He know the man afraid they'll burn down his church later. Maybe they promise him the bottom of the river or something. So we just say, come, let's go. You could tell that by the time we reached Greenwood, people's is all tired and nerves on edge. Them gang members from Chicago making all that noise in the tents at night. I met these people from Chicago. They're 4 students. I think they're from the university there. They all very nice, and they mad about those gang leaders that they call them bums, but they just afraid of them as everybody else. You know Silas McGee, he lives in Greenwood, and he come out to join the march back in Grenada. Before we get to Greenwood, he point to a car with a lot of white guys in it, and he say, uh-oh, there's trouble. The troopers seem to know the guys, too, because they went over to them, and lots of the newspaper guys and TV guys jump off of the news truck and follow them. I could hear the whites all bragging about what they're going to do, and how they will shoot some of the marchers, and Silas say, they probably will. One of the newsmen asked him, how do you know that? Silas, he just smiled and say, I ought to know that because they already have. These are the same guys that shot me once. Leroy shook his head and closed his eyes as he let his head fall back against the seat of the station wagon. We had both seats folded all the way back so we could take a nap later. I like to just stay here in the car and rest till we get to Jackson, he said. I try to think about nice things, like them 2 tall girls in Grenada. Then I don't have room to think about all the arguments that get worse when we get into Greenwood. One SCLC staff person say that plans are being made for us to go to Philadelphia, Mississippi to have a memorial service for the civil rights workers that were killed there. And he say that while we're there, we're going to register voters in their name. One of the SNCC kids that was standing there turned to him and asked, you ever been there, he say? Tell you what, man, you go out registering them in Philadelphia, and we're going to watch and learn how. Everybody laughed. Silas, he got into an argument, and some newspaper guy come over and asked him questions, but you can see that he don't want to talk to them much. Later, this bald guy, I don't remember his name, he was making a speech, and he say, see Silas there? So he'd tell everybody the story about the McGee family. He say there's 5 sons and 1 daughter. The brother name's Clarence, Jake, Silas, Ben, and Alfred, and their sister named Ann. Silas was in high school in 1961, and after the accommodation bill passed, he decided he's going to go in the white section in the movies like we done. He couldn't get nobody to go with him, so he go alone. He got beat real bad, but that's just the beginning for the McGee family. The Klan, or the Knights of the Green Forest, or whatever they call themselves. You know, them same clowns with the sheets on their heads. They ride by and they fire bullets in the McGee house. One time they set the house on fire. One day Silas was sitting in a pickup truck and this man come by and he say, nigger, move that truck. Silas say, I'm waiting on Ben. I'll move it in a minute. The man say, move that goddamn truck or I'll blow your brains out. A few minutes later, somebody fired a bullet in the truck and it hit Silas right in the cheekbone. They took him to the hospital and everybody thought he was dead. You know, that bald-headed man say, that's just the beginning of the McGee story. I know that someday somebody's going to write a book about the McGee family. And the man say, you see, in this democracy here, you have to own property to be a voter. And Laura McGee says she owned property, so she going to vote. Then the man try and say she's insane. That way they're going to try to have her committed and take her house, so she can't vote. That would be a lesson to any other black person to try to vote. Ben McGee's in the army, the white man's army. Then the bald man made everybody laugh when he say, I don't give him any credit for that. He say, listen, what happened to him in this democracy that he fighting for? He come home on leave to see his mother, and thugs here grab him and beat him bad and stuff him in a phone booth where the police come and arrest him for disturbing the peace. When the army find out what happened, they come and get him so he can get well and go fight for free elections for the Vietnamese. Then he point to Silas and he say, here's Silas McGee today, marching with us. And when we leave here, he gonna stay and fight for free elections for all Americans. Everybody cheer and look over at Silas. Later, when the arguments about violence start again, somebody asks him, hey Silas, when they beat you like that, didn't you ever fight back? Silas looked over at him and smiled. Fight back against all of them? If I do fight back, I'd be doing just what they want me to do. Then they just kill me and say I attacked them. Well, why didn't you get a gun and shoot them back? The man asked. They got too many guns, and they got the right to use them. Did you hear the man this afternoon say he gonna shoot me? If I was white and in some other place, the police would arrest them for threatening my life and take their guns away. But you don't see that happening here, do you? If he knew that I had a gun, he'd just shoot me. Then he'd be rid of me, and the white judge would say he'd kill me in self-defense. And the man would just walk away to kill more peoples. No, I ain't gonna play that game. I got a gun. They get two. Hell, the Indians learned that lesson long ago. It made me feel real good to hear Silas talk like that to them kids from Chicago. They can't say he not a man. He probably the bravest man that I will ever see, and here he talking nonviolence. I was so glad. I remember Silas when he come to Selma, but I didn't know him then. Now I want to tell everybody what Silas McGee say. To tell you the truth, Mr. Truskoff, I'm sick of these arguments. They start the very first day and they still going. I remember it was in Marks, Mississippi when it all really began. I remember because we had a meeting that day. They was planning the funeral for old Mr. Phipps, who had died. Some of the marchers was going back for his funeral. Did you go? No, Leroy, I couldn't. But I think most of the SNCC people went because they tell me that he was a great help to them. Yes, that's what they say at that meeting. Hosea was telling us to remember when they shout Black Power, we just start singing. He also said that we got to keep up the morale of the marchers. I still trying to do that. You know, Mississippi ain't that much different than Alabama. The state troopers is bad. The local police is bad. But I think the sheriff's department here are worse. I think there was Leon Hall that said to me, hey, Leroy, you know we're going to march through Sheriff Rainey's town. I knew that's where them 3 civil rights workers get killed, and I say to myself, we're going to catch holy hell there. As usual, we had a transportation problem. But here it is, much worse than in Selma. One of the reasons is that with the SNCC peoples always shouting Black Power, lots of whites are staying away, and they didn't send much money this time or donate cars. I got put back in transportation right away. I was glad to see you came down, because back in Mississippi I was thinking that if we have a lot of whites and news people, then Mississippi ain't going to be so bad. But then I see that many come down. I didn't see that many came down. It ain't like Meredith. I don't know who he think he is, but I sure don't want to walk through this state alone. I hear Willie Ricks and other SNCC people saying that they don't want any more white kids coming down here. Local black peoples has got to free themselves and not expect others to do it for them. Yeah, I can just see how many Negroes people's going to get killed that way, Mr. Truskoff. Dave. Okay, Dave. I don't know about you, but it's a funny feeling that I have. Because before all the Negroes was together to fight for freedom, and now to tell the truth, there's some Negroes here that I afraid of. When they start talking about spilling white man's blood like Willie Ricks do, then I say, Lord Leroy, watch where you're going, because you're going to fall in with some of them Negro peoples that are more violent than the Klan is. I got to keep saying, like Hosea say, ain't no man, black or white, going to make me violent. I saw you in them arguments outside the tent last night. You best stay away from them, Dave. I saw the newspaper guys that stayed here instead of going back into the motel, standing outside the tent laughing. Some of them was egging SNCC kids on. One of them dumbbells say, if Sheriff Rainey gonna show me his gun, now I'm gonna show him something. This white guy, I don't know if he from the news truck or the Justice Department, he say, you got a gun? And that kid say, white man, you soon may find out. I hear that one kid from Chicago tell you that you better keep your mouth shut, and he don't want to hear no white man telling Negroes to be nonviolent while a man is busting their heads. He say you keep talking that way, he gonna bust your head. One guy, he really made me mad, and I was gonna get into it, but Hosea say he send me home if I do. That guy say Dr. King ain't his leader. He say King the leader of the white folk, and he trying to save Whitey. He say that King gonna find out when he get to Philadelphia, Mississippi, that he can't talk no integration or nonviolence with Rainey's gun. He pat his side and he say, this is the only thing that talked to Rainey's gun. I think to myself, what a fool that boy is. He carrying a gun. That bad. And then he telling the news guys that he got it. That's just stupid. Yeah, Mr. Truskoff, I think we're going to see something before this march is over. When I hear Andy and Dr. King singing, We ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. I'm saying, I hope these guys on the march ain't gonna turn around, 'cause I don't know how we gonna fight them. When Stokely and Willie Rick start chanting Black Power, I start singing as loud as I can. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. I hope that you aren't planning to go on to Philadelphia with them, but I bet you are. When I first hear that they plan to go there, I say, Leroy, you will go where they say, but I hope they don't say Philadelphia. Look at here, Leroy. You risk your life to get them peoples registered so they can vote and get themselves free. But going up there is like going back to Sunflower County and trying to register the peoples of Senator Eastland's plantation. You're going to have to do that with U.S. troops and not just a bunch of unarmed marchers. I know that it got to be done. Negro peoples there need freedom too. But I'm afraid that the group going to be smaller than the one that tried to cross the bridge that first time in Selma, and the result's going to be the same. I'm worried about the same thing, Leroy. I don't mind telling you. I'm scared. I keep trying to talk myself out of it. Well, maybe you ought to do it. If I don't go, I'll pray for those that do. And I do hope that nobody gets hurt bad. You know Sweetness, she with us, and she say she going. She tell me that she gonna stand right next to Thomas of the Deacons, and she say she gonna stay there for the rest of the march. If there is shooting, she say, I'm gonna be right behind him. I parked my car behind the Deacons last night, and I watched them cleaning their rifles, them army guns that they got, and them other guns. I know that Dr. King is right, but what if the shooting do start? And what if we caught in the middle of it, and them whites is trying to kill me? What would I do? I had to laugh when I hear Stokely telling everybody about how Dr. King tackled him to keep him from charging that cop that pushed Dr. King so hard off the grass. Stokely say, I know that he done the right thing, but it sure looked like physical violence to me. I laughed, but I still hope I ain't going to Philadelphia. In Miss Liuzzo's car that night, I had no choice but to act like I was dead. There was nobody firing bullets from our side then. Maybe I don't want to know the answer.